Hi everyone, Kendall here for another week of our What's in Your Closet Sew Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. This week is all about suits, pants and ties. Were you a corporate person? Are you a corporate person? Do you wear suits? Do you own a suit? Tell us when you share your blog at Pat's Facebook group, Quilt Along with Pat Sloan, and share a picture of your completed blog. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how I do it. So this week I did make a few changes to which fabrics I cut out in which sizes, and it is actually quite simple. I kept all of the light fabrics the same, but instead of cutting 4 squares of the medium fabric, I cut 2 each of the medium and the dark, and in place of 2 dark squares, I cut 1 each in a medium and a dark. And that's just so I can change up how my colours display, which you would have seen in the thumbnail of the video. So to begin, we need to make half square triangles out of all of our pieces except those rectangles. So we'll take all of our background squares, both the small and the large ones, draw a line on the diagonal in one direction only, match those up right sides together with the corresponding size squares, take those to the machine and stitch 1/4 of an inch on each side of our drawn line. I bet you know what comes next. Now that we've sewn on each side of our drawn line, we just need to clip these apart, and then, as you may or may not be aware, I love to give these a little press first to set those seams before taking them to the cutting mat and slicing them in half on our drawn line. We'll then need to press all of these to the darker of the 2 fabrics, and we'll be ready for trimming down. So over the last few weeks, you would have seen, or you may not have seen, that I've been using my makeshift block lock with having the painter's tape across the diagonal of my ruler to just nest up against those seams. But this week, as you can see, the painter's tape is no longer there, and I'm returning to my 2 at a time trim down method. To do this, I make sure that those blocks on that seam are nice and snugly nested. I then place the diagonal from the 6.5 inch rule along the stitching line. I make sure that there's enough fabric outside the required trim down measurement on all 4 sides. That includes the 2 sides that are currently under the ruler, before trimming the first 2 sides. We then rotate this block around very carefully. If it comes unnested, just snug that back in there. You can now place that diagonal line back on the stitching line and line up the required trim down measurement of the 4.5 inches, in this case, on those freshly cut sides, and trim the last 2 sides. Do this for all of your half square triangles. that all of our half square triangles are trimmed to perfection, we're going to take all of the smaller half square triangles and sew them together in sets of 2. Once we've got these sewn together, I'm going to clip into that seam allowance about halfway along, and then I can control which way the bulk of the seam goes by putting them in opposing directions so that they'll sit nice and flat. So we'll sew all of these together in sets of 2 and give them a snip into the seam allowance and then press them. As you know, I cut mine out in a mixture of the medium and dark fabrics, and this is just so that I could have both of them alternating in both the large pinwheel that's formed in the middle and on these little fins that we're adding now. So take your sets of 2 half square triangles we just sewn together and attach them to the top of the larger half square triangles, paying attention to the orientation of your dark or medium fabric in the large half square triangle so that we get the desired result of this block. Once we've sewn these on, we'll press those out, and then we can add our large rectangle to the remaining side. In this instance, it will go on the left hand side, and then we'll press towards that solid rectangle. All of our units are now made, so we just need to lay this out as per the pattern, and we just form a pinwheel. So refer to the pattern for the correct layout, and then this will go together as a simple 4-patch. We'll start by sewing those 2 vertical seams, and then we'll sew our horizontal seams. And I'm just showing you there that I have all of my seams in opposing directions, so everything will actually nest when we come to sew this together. Once again, we're just going to sew this together as a 4-patch now. We'll start with our 2 vertical seams and then our horizontal seam. Now that we have got those vertical seams done, to ensure that this seam in the middle also nests, we need to make sure that we press these both in the same direction so that when we flip the bottom one upside down to create our pinwheel again, they are in opposing directions and will nest. So you can see, because I have those different colors, I'm able to press both of mine towards the red fabric. But if you pull them off the machine and put them in the same orientation before you press, you will get that middle seam to nest. We're also going to spin that center seam, as there are 8 pieces of fabric coming together in the center. With our last seam now sewn, as I said before, we are going to spin the center of this block, as we do have 8 pieces of fabric coming together. To do this, we just unpick those few stitches that are above our seam that we just made on both sides, and then we give the block a little twist and we finagle those seam allowances in the direction we want them to go. Basically, that is just to spin them, and in this instance they will all go counterclockwise. I must have missed a little bit of the thread there, so I'll grab a little seam ripper and just pop those last few stitches to make sure that we can get the center of this as flat as possible. What you should see is a miniature pinwheel in the middle of that spun seam, but if you don't, that's okay. Now we'll just give this a press and lock everything into their final locations. And the block for this week is done. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks. You're a delight, and I really enjoy being here for you. So for you to show your appreciation to me, why don't you like the video, share it with a friend if you think they might enjoy it as well. Click the little subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and why not? It's free. It costs you nothing but helps me out massively. Most importantly, tickle that little bell icon to be notified of all my future releases, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you really think. Okay, folks, I will see you all again real soon. Bye for now.